Welcome to Sumantra Codes, where I teach you how to code in Python. This is episode 9 of our series, and in this video, we are going to learn about loops and iteration, which are very useful concepts in programming. So let's get started. So what are loops and why we use them? A loop is a way of repeating a block of code multiple times until a certain condition is met. Loops are very helpful when you want to perform the same task or operation on different values or data. Loops can save you time and effort by avoiding writing the same code over and over again. For example, suppose you want to print the numbers from 1 to 10. You can write the print statement like this: print 1, print 2, similarly 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And when we run it, we'll see all the numbers printed on the output console. But this is not very efficient or elegant. A better way is to use a loop. You can write a loop that repeats the print statement 10 times like this. For I in range 1 to 11, print I. And if we run this, we'll again get the same output as earlier. This way, you have to write the print statement once and then repeat it 10 times by using a variable called I that changes its value from 1 to 10. This makes your code more concise and easy to modify. So there are two main types of loops in Python: while loops and for loops. We'll learn about both of them in this video. A while loop is a type of loop that executes a block of code repeatedly as long as a condition is true. The condition is checked before each iteration of the loop, and if the condition is false, the loop stops and the program moves on. The syntax for writing the while loop is while condition colon and the block of code which is indented under while condition. For example, let's again write the same program that prints the number from the range 1 to 10 using while loop. So here we'll initialize the variable I to 1 and then we'll use while condition I is less than 10 and then print the value of I, and over here we'll also increment the value of I by 1, and when we'll run it, it will again print the numbers from 1 to 10 on a separate line. Notice that we have used a variable called I to keep track of the number of iteration. We initialized I to 1 before the loop and then incremented it by 1 at the end of each iteration. We also used condition I is less than equal to 10 to check if the loop should continue or stop. You can use any expression that evaluates a Boolean value, which is either true or false, as the condition for a while loop. You can also use logical operators such as AND, OR, and NOT to combine the multiple conditions. For example, let's write a while loop that prints the even number from 2 to 20. So first, we'll initialize the variable I to 2, and then we'll write a condition that if I is less than equal to 20, and using logical operator, we'll use condition I percentage or modulo operator 2, which checks whether the number I is divisible by 2 or not, is equal to 0. Then I'll print I and then we'll increment I by 2. Now if we run it, this will print the even numbers from 2 to 20 on a separate line. However, if we have not used this logical condition also and just executed the program, it will also have printed the even number because we are incrementing it by 2. So this I have shown you as a reference only. Sometimes you may want to alter the flow of a loop based on some conditions or event. For example, you may want to stop the loop before it finishes all the iterations, or you may want to skip some iteration and continue with the next ones. To do this, you can use break and continue statements. So basically, what are break and continue statement? The break statement is used to exit the loop immediately and move on to the next statement after the loop. The syntax for using break statement is just writing break statement inside the while loop. For example, let's write a while loop that asks the user to enter a number and print it. The loop should stop when the user enters 0. So it should be an infinite loop, and infinite loop is represented by while true condition. So this will keep executing until a certain condition is met inside the loop, and we break the loop using the break statement. So let's ask user to input a number. Let's just typecast it to an integer and then assign it to a variable number. Now, if number is equal to 0, then just write break. Otherwise, let's print the number. Now, let's just run this program. First, we'll enter a number 5, printing a 5, 77, printing a 77, minus 22, printing a 22, and as soon as we enter 0, the while loop will terminate by executing the break condition and our application will get terminated. So again, I'm emphasizing over here that we have used a condition true as the condition for while loop. This means that the loop will run forever unless we break statement to stop it. We also used an if statement to check if the number entered by the user is 0. If it is, we use break statement to exit the loop. Otherwise, we'll print the number and continue with the next iteration. Similarly, the continue statement is used to skip the current iteration of the loop and move on to the next one. The syntax of continue statement is similar like break. We have to just write continue inside the while loop. So let's write a while loop program that prints the odd number from 1 to 10. There are many ways to do this, but over here we'll showcase how to do it using continue statement. Let's initialize I to 1 and then let's put the condition that I is less than 10 because we want to print odd number less than or equal to 10. Okay. Now remove this input and over here let's check the condition whether I is divisible by 2 or not using modulo operator, and if this condition is true, we'll just increment the value of I and continue. Otherwise, we'll print the I and again increment the value of I. So let's just run this program. So you can see the program is printing the odd numbers from 1 to 10 on a separate line. Notice that we used an if statement to check if I is even. If it is, we increment the value of I by 1 and use the continue statement to skip the iteration and move on to the next one. Otherwise, we'll print the I and increment it by 1 as usual. Now, let's see how to use for loops to iterate over a sequence. A for loop is another type of a loop that iterates over a sequence of items. A sequence is an ordered collection of items such as list, tuple, string, etc. A loop executes a block of code for each item in the sequence. The syntax for writing a for loop is for item in sequence : the indented block of code will get executed inside the for loop. For example, let's write a loop that print each element of a list. So let's first define a list. Fruit will assign apple, banana, and cherry. Now using for loop, let's try to iterate over each element of fruits. So for this, we'll use syntax for fruit in fruits, which imply for every fruit in the list fruits : print fruit. That's it. This is a simple example of a for loop. We'll run it and we can see that output has given us apple, banana, cherry at a separate line. Notice that we have used a variable called fruit to refer to each element of fruit. We can use any name for this variable, but it's a good practice to use a descriptive name that makes sense. We also used the in keyword to indicate that we are iterating over fruits. You can use any sequence as the source of iteration for a loop. For example, let's define a tuple of integer number. And 5. Again, to iterate over each element of numbers, we'll use for number in numbers, print number. That's it. And if we run it, we'll see that this is printing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 on a separate line. Similarly, we can define a name string. So my name, Sumantra. Again, for every character in my name, print that character. And if we run it, it will print SUMANTRA on a separate line. Sometimes you may want to iterate over a sequence of numbers that are not stored in a list or a tuple. For example, you may want to iterate over numbers from 0 to 9 or from 10 to 20 or with a step of 2. To do this, you can use the range function to generate a sequence of numbers for iteration. The range function returns an object that represents a sequence of numbers. You can use the range object as a source of iteration for a for loop. The syntax of using the range function is range, start, stop, and step. The start parameter is the first number in the sequence. The stop parameter is the number that ends the sequence but not included in the sequence. The step parameter is the difference between the number in the sequence. The start and step parameters are optional and default to 0 and 1 respectively. For example, let's write a for loop that iterates over the numbers from 0 to 9 using the range function. So for generating a sequence from number 0 to 9, excluding 10, we'll use for I in range 10. And over here, we're using the default parameter of start, which is 0, and step, which is 1. We'll just print the number. And when we run it, it's printing 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 on separate line. Notice that we have used a variable called I to refer each number in the sequence. We also used the range function with one argument 10. Again, I'm repeating it. This means that the sequence starts from 0 and ends at 10, but not including 10. The step is 1 by default, so the numbers are incremented by 1. You can also specify the start and step parameters. For example, let's generate a sequence of numbers from 10 to 20. This means we'll be using 21 because it will exclude the stop number and with a step of 2. And then again, when we run it, it will print 10, 12, 14, 16, 18, and 20 on separate lines. Notice that again, we have used the range function with 3 arguments over here, 10, 21, and 2. This means the sequence starts at 10, ends at 21, but not including 21. The step is 2, and the number is incremented by 2. The step is 2, so the numbers are incremented by 2. The range function is very useful for generating sequences of number for iteration. You can use it to create loops that repeat a certain number of times or that iterate over a certain range of values. Sometimes you may want to get both the index and the value of each element in a sequence when you iterate over. For example, you may want to print both the position and name of each fruit in list. To do this, you can use enumerate function to get a pair of index and value for each element in a sequence. The enumerate function returns an object that represents an enumeration of a sequence. You can use enumerate object as the source of iteration for a loop. The syntax for using the enumerate function is enumerate, sequence, and start. The sequence parameter is the sequence that you want to enumerate. The start parameter is the starting index of the enumeration. The start parameter is optional and defaults to 0. For example, let's write a for loop that prints both the index and value of each element in the list using enumerate function. So let's again define the list of fruits. So we have defined the list. So now to use enumerate, we'll use for index and value, which is returned by enumerate function in enumerate fruits print index and value. And now if we run it, it will print 0 apple, 1 banana, 2 cherry. Notice that we have used 2 variables called index and value to refer to each pair of index and value in the enumeration. We also use the enumerate function with one argument, fruit. This means that the enumeration starts from 0 by default. You can also specify the start parameter to customize the starting index of the enumeration. For example, if I'll change start position to 1 and then execute it, this will print 1 apple, 2 banana, 3 cherry. Notice that we have used enumerate function with two arguments, fruits and start 1. This means that the enumeration start from 1 instead of 0. The enumerate function is very useful for getting both the index and value of each element in a sequence when you iterate over it. You can use it to access or modify elements based on their position or to their display order. Now, to iterate over a dictionary using a for loop, you can use many methods. And there are few following methods which I'm going to show it to you. The first way is to use the keys method to get an iterable list of dictionary keys, and then use the keys as an index to access the corresponding value. For example, we'll first define a dictionary of fruits where the name of the fruit is the key and the value is the associated price, 9. So we have defined a dictionary of fruits and their price. To iterate over the keys of fruit, we'll have to write for key in fruits dot key colon print. We'll use f string key colon value of the associated key in the dictionary fruit. Let's try to run it. So this is printing apple 2.99, banana 0.99, and cherry 3.49. This is one of the methods to iterate over a dictionary using loop. Another way is to use items method to get an iterable list of key value pair in a dictionary and then unpack them into two variables. For example, for key value in dictionary item, print f string symbol and then value. And if we run it, this will print the same output as earlier. So you can use any of these methods to iterate over a dictionary using a for loop, depending on your preference and convenience. You can also modify the loop body to perform any operation or task on a dictionary element. Now that you have learned about loops and iteration, it's time to practice what you have learned by doing a hands-on exercise. So let's write a program that asks the user to enter a non-negative integer n and prints the factorial of n. The factorial of n, denoted by n exclamation, is the product of all positive integer less than or equal to n. For example, 5 factorial would be written as 5 into 4 into 3 into 2 into 1, which is 120. So let's start writing the code. So we'll first ask user to enter a non-negative integer n. So we'll use input function and write over there enter a non-negative integer. We'll then convert it into int type and then assign it to a variable n. Next step is to initialize a variable to store the factorial. So we'll say factorial is assigned to 1, and then we'll use a while loop to iterate from n to 1. So we'll write condition while n is greater than 0, we'll multiply n to the factorial and then decrement n by 1. So this while loop will evaluate the factorial and finally will print the value of factorial using f string. The factorial of n inside curly braces is factorial inside curly. That's it. Now let's run it. So we'll enter a non-negative integer 5. The factorial is 120. Again, once more we'll execute 7. Factorial is 5040, which is correct. So this concludes our session for today. We have learned Python loops and iteration. And in the next episode, we'll learn about Python functions and parameters. If you have any questions or feedback, please let me know in the comments below. Thanks for tuning into Sumantra Codes. And if you found this helpful, give it a thumbs up and subscribe for more coding tutorials, tips, and insights. Hit the notification bell too, and let's continue this coding journey together. Stay tuned.